Um, so we're starting 1 Corinthians. It's quite a lengthy series compared to some of the series that we've done. It's 16 chapters, so we're going to dip into a chapter a week. And that's going to be fun because we're going to go through the process of Corinthians and all that Paul was talking about with them. And there are some really relevant things in Corinthians for us today, things that we can learn about. You know, it's amazing how current the Bible is. It never goes out of fashion. It might go out of people's awareness, but it never goes out of fashion. It's a wonderful thing that speaks to our hearts. And 1 Corinthians 1, in this, Paul introduces something very relevant to our society in particular. And I'll get onto that a little bit later. Now, as we're going to go through, there is a lot of information about Corinth. There's a lot. Because, I don't know, some of you might have been to Corinth. Has anybody ever been to Corinth here? Tim. So, if you want to know anything about Corinth, go and see Tim. And there is a lot to know, right? Have you been to the ruins there? You've seen the ruins? Because there are modern day excavations and archaeological insights that are just huge. There's so much information. All the buildings can still be seen there, not in their full state, but where the ruins are, where they stood. The roads are still there. There's literature in history about Corinth. There's loads and loads of information. So what I'm going to do is just drip feed that throughout the series, because if you have it all in one go, it would just be a bit too much to take on board. So if you just have the first clip up, Tim. This is just to get us grounded as to where we're talking about. Corinth is on an isthmus. I'm not quite sure if that's the way you pronounce it, but it's a body of land. Here we are, there's Corinth there. And there's Greece. And just there where that black square is, a little bit unfortunate, but there's like a little land bridge. And that's where Corinth is, right underneath that. What they used to do is, this is how Corinth made its money in the day, because ships would sail around here, and this was quite treacherous waters. So it was actually quicker and cheaper to lift the boats out of the water here, put them on like rollers, roll them across this little piece of land, and then back into the water here. And off they'd go. And that's how Corinth made its money. Let's have the next clip, please, Paul, Tim. And these are the excavations that if we built up the walls, that's what it would look like today. You can see it's got like the amphitheatre there, and this Lycian Road is actually really important. It's only a road, okay, but it's a really important road because that is really intact, and there are lots of things either side of that we can get into at a later stage. The Agora is where they had like races and sporting events, and all of these things are still there. The temple, I better get the pointer out so you know what I'm looking at. The temple up here, Octavia, that can still be seen. And there's a temple of Apollo there. And again, some of them have still got the pillars still standing. It's amazing. So there's a lot of information about Corinth. And it makes it interesting as well because it's not just a made-up place when it's, there's something tangible and real about it, yeah. In this first chapter, Paul is asking us to pull down the curtains. You know, when Jesus died on the cross, the curtain in the Holy of Holies that divided the temple, the curtain that divided the temple from the normal room, if I put it like that, between that and the holies of holies, was ripped and torn in two. And Paul is talking about here pulling down the curtains in our lives. We all want to belong to something. We all want to be a part of something. Maybe a part of the inner circle, a part of the in group. And our society today is even more like that with social media and influencers and who we're following. We want to be part of the winning side. And, I guess there's nothing wrong with that in a way. That's a normal desire. However, it can take us off at a tangent if we're not careful. Because if we're not careful, we can start seeking status. And there's that saying that we have nowadays, FOMO. Have you heard of that? Has anybody ever had FOMO before? Fear of missing out. Yeah, has anybody ever had that? Whenever we go to a restaurant, I always let Jackie order now, because whenever she orders, she always orders something that I would want. So, unless, of course, it's nachos or rum and raisin ice cream, and then it's a no-brainer. Of course, I'm going to have that. But that fear of missing out on our status or our position somehow, is a real reality, especially nowadays with the pressures of work and materialism. And one of the problems of that fear and that desire for status is that when we're in that situation, we can start comparing ourselves to other people. I'm better than them. I'm not as good as them. And that doesn't work ever. Because if you feel that you're better than somebody, then you're prideful. If you fear that you're not as good as somebody, you can get depressed. And actually, it's not taking into account the truth that Jesus has made you equal. Whether you're a young Christian or an old Christian, once you become a Christian, there is no other inner circle. That's it. That's the reality. That's why being a Christian is such a leveling thing across all parts of our communities and societies and nationalities. Once you're a Christian, that is it. There is no other inner circle. You don't need to beat yourself up by not feeling that you're in the inner circle. And when we do sometimes, and we all do this sometimes, when we do desire that status, or we do desire that inner circle being, as it were, we start to compromise. Maybe we start to say things that we wouldn't normally say, just to be on the inner circle. Sometimes we might not say what we should say in order to be in the inner circle. And there's always another inner circle, isn't there? Once you get to one place, there's always another place to get to. And I know some of you might not be feeling like this because you've perhaps overcome this inner circle and this desire to always be on the inside. Great. If that's you, great. Just let this be a reminder then. Let this be an encouragement to you to keep on the path that you're already on. Don't worry, you're not going to miss out on what God has got for you. If you're a Christian, God has got a plan for you and he's already prepared good works for you to do. He's got a place for you in heaven, a place for you to go. You are already in the inner circle. And just like any other inner circle that we have in our society, there's always another ripple, isn't there? However that looks. If you want to go into politics, you start right at the bottom, and then, I guess the absolute inner circle is the Prime Minister. There's always more to achieve. If you've been in the army, there's always another inner circle of ranks, isn't there? You know what it's like? But our worth does not come from what other people think of us. Our worth does not come from the inner circle. Our worth comes from being in Jesus. That's the only place that we get full contentment, full belonging, only inside Jesus. You perhaps remember when you were younger, those times where you were in the school playground and there would be 2 team captains, and they would be in front of a line of you, and they would pick out whoever they wanted to be on their team in turns. When I was at school, we basically only played football, and I was nearly always the last one, maybe second to last, to get picked for football, until I became the goalie. And then I was, in the first 5 to be picked out. Just changed positions and became part of the inner circle, as it were. But you might have had the same, whether it was the football team or the hockey team, you always wanted to get picked, right? Or the basketball team or the netball team. You never wanted to be the last one picked. You can remember those times? It goes deep inside of us, doesn't it? We don't want to be voted out. Even our TV shows are full of it. You're voted out of Big Brother, or you're voted off the island, or you're voted out of the jungle. Nobody wants to be like that, and our society encourages us. You've got to be in the inner circle. But if you're a Christian, you're already there. You don't need to strive for it. You don't need to be worried about being in the inner circle. Jesus is holding your hand spiritually, right now, right with you. There is no deeper inner circle than that. If you get on a plane, and I guess, is there anybody here who's never been on a plane? Emily and Vince. 2 people. That's quite unusual, right? So, I can explain it, but I guess you might have even seen it on films or something. When you get on the plane, there is first class, business class, and then there's economy. And you get on, and when you get on at first, none of the curtains are drawn, and you can look up and down the aisles, but very soon the curtain gets drawn, and you can't go past the curtain. You can't go from economy into business class, and the business class can't go from business class into first class. And those who are in first class get a really nice seat where they can lie down and have a little sleep if they want to. A little kip on the plane. And their food is delivered to them on plates with cutlery that is real. And they can have proper drinks that are brought to them by a waitress or a waiter. They have a toilet between 5 or 6 people. It's a lot different in an economy. None of that is the same. None of it at all. You might be sharing a toilet with 150 people, 2 toilets between 150 people, and 20 of them are children. You get your food delivered on pieces of plastic, and it's just not as nice. That curtain, once it's drawn, there's no going through. It's like the Berlin Wall. You cannot violate the curtain. The divide excludes us from them. It becomes me and them. And it's the same in schools, and it can be the same in churches as well. The inner circles in churches, the parliament, your workplace. As we go through life, we come across different groups, but the dynamics are more or less the same. Sometimes there's a boss. Have you ever had a boss at work that is a bit mean? But as long as you do exactly what they say and rub up against them and agree with their opinions, then you'll get on all right. But as soon as you don't agree with their opinions, well, you're not in the inner circle anymore. And that's tough. In the early church, everything was going well. You can read all about it in Acts 2. They were together in mind and heart. There were miracles left, right, and centre. There were no big I's and little U's, and there were no haves and have-nots, because they pooled all their resources together. Some say a little bit premature, because those who sold land and divided the money amongst everybody else soon ran out of money themselves. And that's why a while later, Paul is then going around different churches having to ask for money for the churches in Jerusalem because they've spent it all. They mismanaged their money. But they were all in one heart and one mind. They were all grouped together in love. And in Acts 2, verses 44, 46, and various other places, you can see that. It's lovely. There's no haves and have-nots. But it's during that time that the first threat to the church came about. The first thing that potentially could have divided them. And it didn't come from outside. It didn't come from the Pharisees or the Romans. It came from inside because they were distributing food to the widows and they were being unfair with their distribution. So the Hellenistic Christians, basically the ones that weren't Jewish, they were not receiving enough food for their widows, and the Jewish Christians were receiving the food first. And there was a problem about that. And it started to create a division. Thankfully, they were wise and they headed that off quickly. It didn't become catastrophic. They dealt with it. It was wise leadership by Peter and James and the other leaders. And they distributed the food evenly. And bear in mind that this division happened at a time where there were miracles left, right, and centre. 3,000 people just a couple of months before had suddenly become born again at Pentecost. People were getting healed on a daily basis in the temple. You can imagine the disciples coming back from a visit to the temple, describing the latest miracle or the latest person that they met that has become born again. Miracles every day. But it didn't stop the potential of division, and it came from within. So what lessons can we learn from the divisions that were going on in Corinth? Because Paul says that he has heard that some are following Paul, some are following Apollos, some are following Cephas, who is Peter, and some are following Christ. They were dividing amongst themselves. There were divisions there. The four groups were a problem. It wasn't a leadership problem, it was a follower problem. It was a problem in the congregation, not of the leadership. And you might think, well, it's okay if you want to be following Christ. And yeah, you're right, of course that's right. But the danger is that Paul is pointing out is that pride was seeping in. I'm prideful, I'm the one that's following Christ. I'm on the inner circle. Oh no, I'm the one that's prideful. I'm following Apollos. I'm on the inner circle. And what they were doing, in effect, was they were promoting one at the expense of the other, because all of those leaders had their own gifts. If they were following Paul and Paul exclusively, they were following his doctrinal intelligence and wisdom. If they were following Apollos, they were following his preaching and his pastoring. If they were following Peter, they were following his leadership skills. And if they are following Peter and his leadership skills, it's at the expense of the others. The divisions were starting to get in. And Paul is saying to them, this is not how we need to be. We are all servants of Jesus. We are all in the inner circle, and we all have different gifts. Don't focus on one at the expense of losing the other. We all have gifts here today. Every single one of you has a gift that God has given you. And people have gifts even if they don't use them for the purpose of worshipping God as well. Sometimes we need to distance ourselves from leaders when they do things wrong, but that's not the case here. The leaders weren't doing anything wrong. Sometimes there are issues in leaders' lives where you need to distance yourselves from them. There was that man, Zacharyas, what was he called? Ravi Zacharias. Great teaching, but his lifestyle was discovered it wasn't in line with a Christian's lifestyle. He was sexually immoral. But his teachings were very good. We shouldn't distance ourselves from the teachings necessarily, but we might need to distance ourselves from the leaders if things are going wrong. In our society today, we have different teachings that are dominant in the news, especially with what the woke culture. We have different types of teachings about women in ministry. And before long, if you haven't already heard, the next hot potato will be euthanasia and assisted suicide. There are bills being pushed in Parliament that we need to be praying for. And it's good to get informed about these things so that when somebody outside raises the question, you've got a Christian perspective on it that they can consider. What's the solution? Ultimately, the solution to division is unification. We need to be unified. We need to build together, not just in our congregation, but between different denominations and churches, even in Lewes. I'm pleased to say that we have got a good relationship with the other churches in Lewes. It's important. If we didn't, it wouldn't be very nice. Even with our games club, it's going up to the Methodist church during the winter months so that they can pay their heating bills, which is very kind of them, and they're prepared to do that. And we just transport the stuff up there, and we're working together, their church and our church. We do things with the other Baptist church at Ringmer. You know, we preach there, they preach here. We go there, they come here sometimes. We have a Lewes leaders group that I meet with the other leaders from the other churches, and it's all very friendly and we all get on well. It's important there's no divisions there. We need to be unified together and working together. We have churches together in Lewes that organise days of witness and food at Christmas time. And, you know, these things are a witness to the outside as well. But they also unify us and keep us together. Sometimes we have things in the church, like in our church or in any church really, that can divide us, and there are a lot of things that can divide us in church. Perhaps the most controversial is worship. You know, worship divides people like nothing else. It really does. I like this song. Oh, that's rubbish. I don't like that. I like this song. Oh, I don't like that. That's rubbish. I like this style of worship music or that style of worship music. That can really divide us. It might be the preaching. Oh, I prefer that preacher. Oh, no, I prefer that person who's preaching. But why not think of setting aside your preferences in order to accomplish the will of God? Set aside your preferences in order to accomplish the will of God. This means that we put God's purposes first, so that we rejoice not only when Eastgate Baptist Church is rejoicing, but we rejoice when the other churches are doing well as us. When King's Church, their youth work is improving and increasing, let's rejoice with them. We're not in competition with these other churches. Let's rejoice when Southover Church secures a new minister, or when St. Anne's starts a new project. Let's rejoice and join with them in prayer. Don't let our preferences get in the way of God's will being accomplished. Rejoice when Sharon or Tony or Rachel bridge the gap. Rejoice when people have nothing in common and yet still worship together. Rejoice when somebody takes down the first-class curtain in life. God wants us to lovingly deal with what divides us. Sometimes we get frustrated in our services. Don't let that get in the way with your relationship with God. Got a video clip. Are you ready to play it, Tim? We just set it up. It's of a film called Radio. Some of you might have seen it. It's a great clip. This is the introduction to the film, like the preview of it. So you just get a little taster as we're going through.
We do things as a team, gentlemen. Full speed!
In a town driven by competition.
Coach, you reckon these are the boys gonna take us back to state?
If I was to tell you that, y'all wouldn't have anything to talk about.
The last thing anyone wanted
Getting home late?
Can't you just make room for your daughter and football?
was a distraction.
Hey, Einstein, throw it over here. Come on, throw it. Hey, Coach, you took our ball.
That boy has been rolling by here for a long time now.
No, I don't want the football. Why don't you bring it by practice later? I'll find you something to do. See the young man over there? He goes by Radio. He's gonna be helping us out for a while. What exactly is wrong with it?
He the same as everybody else, just a little slower than most.
It's Radio. Put pants up it on.
Just grab something and...
How about this one?
Those look fine, Radio.
Okay.
You got yourself a distraction needs dealing with.
Radio!
Quite a show you put on out there tonight, Coach. Just wonder if you're running a football program or a social club.
We're not gonna be able to take you on a bus today.
Huh?
Some folks, they just don't understand yet, but they're gonna catch on, believe me.
Why on earth are you doing this?
I figure it's the right thing to do. Gary Powers is released from the Soviet Union. True or false?
False!
What'd you say, Radio?
False!
I know we haven't had much chance to talk.
Radio needs what you're doing more than I do.
You play with heart and never stop believing in each other.
It's just better if we do things the way we used to.
You take him out of this school, you might as well just take his life from him.
I'm not so sure we're trying to help somebody here.
Never a mistake to care for someone.
But the truth is, we're not the ones been teaching radio. Radio's the one been teaching us.
It's an old film, and Ed Harris plays the coach Jones, as you saw in that. It's good because finally the coach needs to make a decision. There were things that were dividing his life, and he had to make a decision as to which was most important for him. Ultimately, he was told that he needs to quit his job, give it up, or give up radio and his relationship with him and his relationship with his family. I won't tell you what happens actually in the end. Maybe you'll see it. But it's not quite the ending that you would necessarily expect. The challenge was for the coach to bridge the gaps, to pull the curtain down for radio's life so that he could be one with the others, part of the team, part of the inner circle. Perhaps we could pull some curtains down for other people. Perhaps we could allow them to come into our inner circle, talk to them, chat with somebody you haven't spoken to before, draw alongside somebody that you haven't shared a coffee with. Perhaps pray for somebody you haven't prayed for before, even here. We can pull down the curtains today. The curtains that we've got in our lives. We could include other people in the inner circle of our life today. One thing is true. Satan will have no hold over us if we are united in Christ together. No hold over us. This is what he wrote in 1 Corinthians. Paul says, I appeal to you, brothers, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another so that there may be no divisions among you, and that you may be perfectly united in mind and thought. My brothers, some from Chloe's household have informed me that there are quarrels among you. What I mean is this. One of you says, I follow Peter. Another, I follow Apollos. Another, I follow Cephas. Still another, I follow Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized into the name of Paul? I am thankful that I did not baptize any of you except Crispus and Gaius. So no one can say that you were baptized into my name. Yes, I also baptized the household of Stephanas, and beyond that I don't remember if I baptized anyone else. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with words of human wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. So focus on Christ. Focus on what's really important. And allow the petty issues of our lives to get lost. Just allow the petty issues to get lost so that we can demonstrate love based in unity, so that we can pull those curtains down. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. It's a quick 5 minutes today to discuss on the tables. You might want to swap tables or move around. You might want to pull some curtains down in order to do that as well. To go and sit on another table or sit with somebody else you haven't sat with before. And ask the question of each other, what curtains have you pulled down? And what curtains have you put up that you need to pull down? Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. Chat amongst yourselves.